Hi guys, it's Cornish kayak angler here from kayakfishing.blog. In my recent videos we've been looking at setting up an anchoring system on fishing kayaks. Specifically we've looked at different types of anchors you can use, setting up the anchor with a length of chain for a more effective anchor system, also incorporating anti-snag devices onto the anchor, as well as looking at the anchor trolley in detail and how to go about setting one of those up on a kayak for safe and easy anchoring. And in the next couple of videos I'm going to look at using those elements and putting them together to set up different anchoring systems, complete anchoring systems on the kayak so you can anchor your fishing kayak. In today's video I'm going to look at a very simple and basic anchoring system that I use on my kayak, a very easy system to use, and going to use a couple of components. You're going to need your anchor, and also you're going to need an anchor reel loaded with anchor line. I'm going to run through those quickly before we have a look at setting up the whole system on a fishing kayak. In a previous video I ran through different types of anchors you can use on a fishing kayak, and I'm quickly going to run through a couple of the anchors I use on my own kayak as part of the anchoring system I'm going to show you today. So this one here is a 1.5 kilo folding grapnel anchor, and I'm using it in conjunction with about 1 metre to 1.5 metres of 6mm short link galvanised chain. Again, I've explained the use of chain in a previous video, it might be worth checking that one out. It makes for a more effective anchoring system that will hold the bottom better. But this is also set up as a weak link anti-snag system. To do this, the chain is attached to the bottom of the anchor with a small D-shackle, and the chain runs up the anchor to the top eye and is attached via a small cable tie weak link, which will snap out when you're snagged and you paddle up tight to the anchor. Again, explained in a previous video if you want to have a look at anti-snag systems in detail. That's one anchor I use with my simple basic anchoring system. Great for rough ground, mixed ground, can be used on clean ground in calm conditions. So that's a good all-round anchor for kayak fishing. The other anchor I use is this one here. This is a 1 kilo Bruce anchor, sometimes called a claw anchor. Again, this one I use with a slightly longer length of chain, about 1.5 to 2 metres of the 6mm short link galvanised chain. And again, set up as an anti-snag system with the chain running off the top of the anchor and a length of cord running down the top of the anchor. This is so that all the weight's off the nose of the anchor, there's no weight on top of the anchor, which might cause the anchor to fall on its side and not anchor correctly as you drop it to the bottom. Again, explained in a previous video if you want some more detail on that. And it's set up as the weak link anti-snag system with a cable tie at the top there. So this one, great for clean ground on sand, gravel, shingle, mud, etc. So then those two anchors there, the Bruce anchor, folding grapnel anchor, they're two anchors I use with my simple and basic anchoring system. Now the next thing you're going to need some anchor line, and you need anchor line to run between the anchor and your kayak. So we'll have a look at that next. A common question is, what anchor line do I need to use to anchor my fishing kayak? Now a lot of people make the mistake of using anchor line that's too thick, something like a 4mm or 5mm cord, or worse still, blue nylon rope. It's too thick, it's not needed. If you've ever been snagged in a fishing kayak with your fishing rod, you'll probably know that even in a reasonable tide or reasonable choppy water, something like 30-pound braid is enough to hold you steady whilst your rod's snagged. So you don't need necessarily really thick, strong line to anchor your fishing kayak, but there is a trade-off. You don't want to use really thin line because it's going to be difficult to handle when you're retrieving the anchor. You don't want it cutting into your hands. So you want, I found through experience a cord of around 1.5mm or 2mm, something like that in diameter, works really well as anchor line. Just some multi-filament braided cord, or something like mouse line, example of some here. This is a 1.5mm cord here. That works really well as anchor line, more than strong enough to hold a big heavy fishing kayak at anchor even in really rough conditions. Now with anchor line, you're going to need some way of storing it neatly on the kayak. It's no good having several tens of yards of line and not being able to store it correctly on the kayak. Easiest way to do it is to use an anchor reel of some description. Now, if you're only in shallow water, say you're only ever fishing a shallow lake 20 foot or so deep, you can get away with a very simple anchor reel, something like this. This is just a wooden winder made out of a piece of plywood with just some cord. You know, it's probably 40 foot of cord on here with a carabiner clipped to the end, so it's nice and easy to clip your anchor on and off to. It's just a zinc plated inexpensive carabiner, but that's fine for if you're only ever fishing shallows. Quite often with saltwater fishing, we're anchoring in much deeper water. It makes more sense to use a slightly nicer reel to store the line, easier to wind on. What makes a great anchor reel is something like these here. These are anchor dive reels, used by divers as marker lines and dive lines. But you get different size ones. There's a couple of sizes here. I think these are both made by Beaver, or this one particularly is. It's called a Beaver Osprey dive reel. It can be picked up from most dive shops, or if you're in the UK, Cornwall Canoes sell these at a good price. But these little reels are great. They're designed for saltwater use, so all good for using on the sea, and they all come loaded up, usually with a 2mm cord. All I've done here on this one is add a zinc plated carabiner to the end, so it's nice and easy to clip your anchor on and off to. But these are a reel with a little lever, ratchet, anti-reverse system on it. You can push that and it allows you to pull the line out, but as soon as you let go it stops solid. So dive reels, yeah, this one's got about 80 metres of line on, so plenty enough for most cases for anchoring. Nice and easy to wind the anchor line onto, and it stores it in a nice compact neat spool. So dive reels, yeah, great, probably the most common thing for using to store anchor line on a fishing kayaks. On my own anchor setup, I've made my own anchor dive reel, anchoring reel. I quite often anchor on some of my marks in really deep water, over 50 metres or something like 200 foot of water. So I need quite a lot of anchor line sometimes. So I made up a super size anchor reel loaded. I think I've got probably best part of 500 foot of line on here. Again, just with a carabiner tied to the end of the line, so it's nice and easy to clip my anchor onto, or the chain onto. But that's just made up of an old rope spool, a small handle. That's actually a Hobie steering handle off one of their kayaks, and a metal bracket here. That's something I made out. There's details of that on my blog if you want to have a look at making your own anchor reel to store anchor line. But yeah, there we go. Yeah, so I'll now show you on my fish kayak how I use an anchor reel with the anchor and set up a very simple and basic anchoring system. Okay, so the first step of the simple and basic anchoring system I use on my kayak is to make sure your anchor is connected to your anchor line and your anchor reel. So here I've got the 1.5 kilo folding grapnel anchor with a metre of chain, and the Beaver dive reel. This one's loaded up with the 80 metres of 2mm cord. I've got a small carabiner there, just tied onto the end of the anchor line, so it's very easy to clip the chain on and off the anchor. Makes it nice and easy when it comes to storing it on the kayak. I can separate them and store them behind me in my crate really easily. But make sure that's well attached to the anchor. You don't want to go dropping your anchor in when it's not attached to your anchor line. That's going to cause some problems and you'll lose an anchor. But that is the first step. And now I'll show you the next step when you place it into the water. Okay, so as I deploy the anchor, I like to have the anchor reel clipped off to somewhere on my kayak. I mean, I just attach it to the seat strap here, but it can be attached to any clip point, just so that you don't go letting go of this and it going over the side. So make sure that's secure somewhere. Then drop the anchor into the water, and as you do, you can clip the anchor line into the carabiner on your anchor trolley, which will be positioned beside the seat, so it's nice and easy to access. Now, as you drop that into the water, you can release the anchor line using the button ratchet here. As you press that, the spool will spin and let out some line. As the anchor's dropping to the bottom, I like to then grab the anchor trolley and shift that to the very stern of the kayak, as far back as it will go. So as soon as that's as far back as it will go, you can then lock that off into your zigzag cleat, which I've got fitted here just back from my seat, so it's nice and easy to reach and access. Now with that locked in, that can't shift from the stern position on the kayak now. And then it's a case of letting out enough anchor line so that you will hold well at anchor in the given conditions. Now in calm conditions, you might only need to let out maybe 1.5 to 3 or 4 times the depth of water you're in of anchor line. So say if you're in 10 meters of water, you might only have to let out maybe 15 to 30 meters or so of line to create a nice angle between the back of the kayak and the anchor, so that the anchor will grip well. In very rough conditions, you will have to let out more anchor line. So in big swell, really choppy rough sea, or in very fast tides, you basically need to make a very shallow angle between your kayak and the anchor. Now that might involve letting out maybe 5 or 6 or more times as much line as the depth you're in. So say if you're in 10 meters of water in a very fast tide, several knots of tide, you need that anchor to hold you really well. You might have to let out maybe 50, 60 meters or more of line to create that nice shallow angle to anchor you well. Takes a little bit of trial and error to know, but it's very easy with this system to drop the anchor to the bottom and then just keep letting line out off the reel just by pressing the button. Let more line out until you think there's enough line to hold you, and then you can tighten up and see if it will hold you and let out more if it's not. So that's there, and then that just leaves, once you've got enough anchor line out, to lock the anchor line off into the zigzag cleat. Now we've already got the anchor trolley line locked off in there. So now it's a case of locking the anchor line off, but in the opposite zigzag pattern. So you can see that there, I'm just doing it in the opposite zigzag to the anchor trolley line, so it's connecting with the empty teeth on the cleat. And you can do that, just wrap it around a few times. If you want to be double sure, go over it twice. That now will be solid. That's not going to slip there, that anchor line. I can pull that as hard as I want, so that will hold your kayak at anchor. And there we have it. That's pretty much the simple and basic, sometimes called a direct anchoring system, set up there. So we've got the dive reel there. That can now be kept clipped where you wanted to, or you can store it behind you so it's out the way, wherever. But there's no tension on that reel. That line's slack there. No tension on the reel itself. All the tension's from the cleat backwards. So this is the very point of the anchoring pressure backwards. So this line will be under tension at anchor. And yep, that runs back all the way to the anchor trolley positioned at the stern. So that's running through the carabiner there, off the stern of the kayak down to the bottom. Obviously it's not very deep in this example here, but you could be in tens of meters depth, and that will run right off to the back to the anchor and the chain assembly on the bottom, like so. I've been using the simple basic anchoring system shown here on my kayaks for many years, and it works really, really well. And the beauty of it really is in the simplicity of the setup, with just the anchor line running direct from the anchor up to the kayak to the cleat where you're anchored off. It makes it very easy to make small adjustments to the anchoring system during your session. So let's say you've launched and gone out at low tide, anchored up, that you're fishing a rising tide. You need to be letting out more anchor line every so often, just so you can stay anchored well with the incoming tide. All you have to do is simply undo the anchor line from the cleat, let out some more line from the reel, and then once you're happy, cleat the anchor line back off again and you're back at anchor. It's very, very simple, quick and easy. And it's also very easy when it comes to hauling the anchor back in. Again, you just got to undo the anchor line from the cleat. Now I like to haul my anchor from the stern of the kayak. Other people like to pull it in from the bow, but I keep my anchor trolley locked off at the stern and undo this and start pulling the anchor line in and until the anchor's back at the kayak. Now, as you do that, particularly if you're in deep water, you'll have a lot of excess anchor line to deal with as it's coming aboard. Few ways to deal with it I've found. You can either throw it over the other side of the kayak, opposite side of the kayak, which usually the water's running down tide there, so it'll take this slack line away from the kayak and prevent it from tangling up. So you can do that until your anchor's back on the kayak. Then once the anchor arrives at the surface, you can shuttle that anchor trolley back to the middle, pull your anchor on board, unclip from your anchor, then quickly wind in all that slack line onto the reel. It makes it nice and easy because there's no tension on the line, so it's really quick to wind in. You can also do it in stages, particularly if you're in deep water. Pull in so much, then cleat it off again, quickly wind in what you've just pulled in, and then undo and repeat again until the anchor's back at the kayak. So there's a few ways of doing it there. Unfortunately with these dive reels, it's quite difficult to wind directly onto the reel with the weight of the anchor, because they're only quite small and it's a 1-to-1 ratio winding it in. It's very difficult to pull that couple of kilos or so of anchor up directly onto the reel, so it's usually best to hand haul your line and then wind the slack line onto that reel. For the people who like to pull it in from the bow of the kayak, some people like to be facing into the conditions, particularly if it's rough, as they haul the anchor. You'd have to let off a lot of slack line, and as you do so, quickly shuttle that anchor trolley all the way up to the bow of the kayak, lock off the anchor trolley line again so the anchor trolley won't shift from the bow, let the kayak tighten up to the anchor reel again, and as it does so, the kayak will swing face on into the conditions and pointing towards your anchor, and then you can again hand haul the line straight back to the kayak like so, and you'll be facing into the conditions as you do so. It's a few ways of hauling the system there. It's nice and easy. It's very simple to do with this system. So yeah, nice and easy. There is one disadvantage to this system, and that is that it's not a quick release system. Now there's another type of anchoring system which I'll look at in my next video, the quick release method, and it makes it very easy to unanchor instantly from your anchoring setup. Now this system does not allow that. It's essentially like a fixed system. Now the only way to quick release from this system is to cut this anchor line. Now in a dangerous situation, say there's a big boat coming towards you, it hasn't seen you, you need to get out the way quickly, there's a rogue wave coming, whatever it may be, you might just be feeling uneasy at anchor, you need to get away quickly and unanchor. You don't have time to pull your anchor in. With this system, the only way to quickly unanchor is to cut that anchor line. Now it's got to be pretty severe conditions to have to do that, but doing so you're going to lose your anchor, but chances are you've got bigger problems to worry about. Now on my buoyancy aid at all times I'm carrying one of these. It's called a beaver trigger line cutter. I just got to pull it out with one hand. It releases a very sharp, razor sharp curved blade. All I have to do is reach to my anchor line, place it around it. That anchor line is going to be under tension. As soon as I pull that line will cut straight away with this blade. I'm instantly released from my anchor. I've lost my anchor. Chances are I've got bigger things to worry about. I need to get out of the way. I'm gone. So disadvantage is it's not necessarily a true quick release system, but it is with a blade. It's not the perfect system in that respect, but the simplicity of it for regular use makes it a great system for anchoring a kayak. Okay, so that covers a very simple and basic anchoring system set up on a kayak. Very easy to use, but with any anchoring of a kayak, it's always best to practice. Practice anchoring in shallow water before you go venturing out of your depth, just so you can get used to the whole procedure of setting the anchor up, putting it into the water, shuttling the anchor trolley back, letting out enough anchor line and clipping off and making the kayak become an anchor. It does take a few goes to get used to the whole process to make sure you're not going to go tangling up anything, but with a little bit of practice it's very easy to do. With a really nice clean setup and lots of practice you can really minimise the risk of any problems occurring. But yeah, that covers the very simple and basic anchoring system I use on my fishing kayaks and I have done for many years. Works really well. In my next video I'm going to look at the quick release anchoring setup. Now this is another really popular way of anchoring a fishing kayak so that you can instantly release from anchor at any point. It's a really popular way of anchoring, particularly for those new to kayaking and anchoring a kayak. It provides a lot of confidence because you can quickly release should anything be going wrong. I'll show you that in great detail in my next video. All the anchoring components I speak about, they're all you can get them all from marine chandlery shops or kayak fishing shops. If you're in the UK, Cornwall Canoes or a kayak fishing specialist store, get in contact with those guys. They've got all the kit you need for anchoring a fishing kayak. For plenty more videos, hit subscribe, and for loads more content, check out my website kayakfishing.blog. Hope that helps you guys, and any questions please ask it below in the comments. Happy fishing, tight lines. Thanks for watching.